Without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Eric.
Thank you. And Joanne, I'm just wondering, just as a quick question from me, how many people are joining us right now?
Right now we have 24 people.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again. I want to thank AANE for hosting this webinar and for allowing Chapa, Citizens Housing and Planning Association, to present and to participate. This webinar, obviously, it's titled Finding Housing for Persons with Disabilities. And you should all see my screen now, so hopefully everything is coming through clear. But I'll talk just first quickly about who we are, who Chapa is. So Chapa's mission is to encourage the production and preservation of housing that's affordable to low and moderate income families and individuals, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. And I know that's a lot, so I apologize. But really, we're based in Boston, and we're a Massachusetts statewide organization that is involved with anything related to housing that will increase access to affordable housing, preserve our affordable housing, and then also produce more. And not only housing, but also community development opportunities. And we do this through 4 key activities. The first is housing advocacy. We do a lot of advocacy with legislators, with policymakers. We consider ourselves almost a think tank for housing policies. Next, part of that is also research. So we put out reports on issues related to housing and try to bring people together, again, to really think about the issues that you all face when trying to find affordable housing. And then community education and training. We participate in webinars like this and other trainings. We also sponsor events and forums, again, to shed light on the pressing issues in housing. And then coalition building. Again, we consider ourselves an umbrella organization, so anybody involved with housing, from nonprofit developers to public housing authorities to independent living centers. We want to bring them together so that we can speak with a united voice when we advocate for housing. So just a little bit of background on myself. I am a policy associate here, so I really work on the advocacy part of this. But by trade, I'm a lawyer, so I've worked in legal aid doing housing law in the past. Really just, again, trying to keep people in their homes and to help them find housing options. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'll go through a quick little outline of what I plan to cover today in the next hour or so, and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. But I'm really going to talk about housing, affordable housing options. And Chapa is a Massachusetts-centered organization, so I'm really going to talk about programs and resources that are available in Massachusetts. Many of the programs, some of the programs are federal, so if you're not from Massachusetts, and I think we may have some folks from New Jersey or Connecticut, there are programs that will be available in your state as well, and I'll point those out to you. And then I'm going to talk about not only the resources, but search tools and tips for finding affordable housing options. Those, of course, will be widely applicable not only to Massachusetts, but to everywhere. So I hope that you can find those useful. And then finally, I'm going to go over some online resources that you can use to find housing options for you. I want to take a minute to recognize that housing is a deeply personal topic. It really gets to the core of who we are when we talk about where we live and what kind of home we have. We'll be discussing how to find a place to call home, which really Chapa and myself I see as a foundation for success, independence, and stability. So it's a really important topic. There's no one-size-fits-all solution or approach to finding your housing need, and it really is an individual decision that you, or if you're searching on behalf of a loved one with a disability, whether it's a mental health disability, autism, or really anything, there are just so many factors that go into finding a home, including finding the location, the level of supports that you need, and other considerations. I won't be able to provide an answer to all of your questions, but as Joanne said, I'll do my best, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, please type them in, and I'll pause, and Joanne will check in at that point about questions. And then at the end, we'll also have a question and answer session. But hopefully this will be a good start for you in trying to find an affordable place to call home. Now that's what we'll cover. I want to talk real quickly about what we won't cover, what the presentation isn't geared towards. And unfortunately today I'm not going to cover how to find family care or other support services that you may need for either yourself or for someone that you may be helping with the search or searching on behalf of. It won't cover group residency options, for example, or group adult foster care, or even developing your own housing. Sometimes people build their own homes, and it won't be covering those topics. These are, of course, important issues that absolutely need to be taken in consideration when you're thinking about your housing, how to add those support services if needed, and should be a part of that decision when you do find or look for your home. AANE has other wonderful resources about helping you to find and arrange these support services. So I encourage you to look out for those with AANE. But again, this presentation will be about finding that physical home for you. We're going to talk about rental options or home ownership options, and the benefits, the plus or minuses of both of those. And then just in terms of background, so adding those support services if they are needed. Again, having that physical unit is the first step, and then finding those support services later can be added to these homes. So with that, I want to jump into the meat of the presentation, and I look forward to really hopefully answering a lot of your questions. So I'm going to start first with, I'm going to talk a lot about affordable housing, and what do we mean by affordable housing. The given definition of affordable housing is affordable to you if you pay about 30% of your income towards total housing costs. And those total housing costs include rent if you're a renter. If you're a homeowner, your mortgage payments. On top of that is sometimes there are condo or homeowner association fees. So that's what we talk about when it's that total housing payment being no more than 30% of your income. Now, persons with disabilities, this can be difficult sometimes. There are persons with low incomes if they have difficulty finding or maintaining a job. And so I brought up some key income levels that when we talk about affordable housing, these are the income levels that there are a lot of programs that are geared towards these levels. We'll talk about low incomes, which is 80% of AMI, and AMI is the area median income. The area median income is set by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, each year, and it's really the middle income for a given area. So half of the incomes are going to be higher than that, and half are going to be lower than that. And those are the income levels that are used as eligibility standards for a lot of these programs. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now and introduce you to some of these terms. So other terms, so low income, that generally is considered 80% of the area median income. And I pulled the Boston area median income, and for a one-person household, it's $51,000, give or take a few $100s. And when we talk about low income, even for me, that's not too low of an income. So you'll see how quickly these income levels you can qualify for these programs that can help you find and maintain affordable housing. And so it's about $51,000, and then right next to it you'll see a number, $1,279 a month. And if you were paying 30% of your income towards rent or towards a mortgage payment, that's what you would be able to afford based on that 30% of the income. So again, just showing you some of the numbers that should come into consideration when you're thinking about how much can I afford, what can I rent. Now, in Boston, and I'm not sure where everybody is joining in from Massachusetts or from around the country, but in Boston, there are expensive rents right now. So using that $1,280 a month towards rent, it's going to be hard to find someplace that you can rent for $1,200, even a one or a two bedroom, and forget about it with a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. So again, the programs that I'm going to cover will you can have the opportunity to help you with those rent payments. Moving up from low income, very low income is 50% of the area median income, and you see the annual income drops, and along with that, the amount that an affordable rent or affordable housing payment also drops. So it goes from $51,000 at 80% of the area median income to $34,000 at 50% of the area median income, and your rent is about $860 a month. That would be considered affordable. And then at the lower end of the income spectrum is extremely low income, and that's earning 30% of the area median income for that area. In Boston, that would be about $20,000 a year. And at that level, the affordable rent is only $516 a month. Now, at 80% of the area median income, it's going to be tough finding that $1,280 a month rent or a mortgage payment. At 30% of the area median income, it's going to be next to impossible to find something that's $516 a month. That's at least safe and decent. So again, I'm going to talk about programs that can help you or who you're searching for find affordable housing options that can help you make up that difference in rent. Now, at the bottom of the page and at the bottom of a lot of slides, there are going to be links, so you can find out more information about a lot of the programs that I'm going to be talking about by following those links. And in this case, this will show you the area median income for your area. So HUD sets it for geographic areas. In Massachusetts, they're broken down by town, so you can search actually by your town, your city or town, what your area median income is. And again, that is going to be the eligibility level that is part of qualifying for a lot of these programs that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions before I move on? Seeing none.
Yes, we do. We do have one question.
Sure.
And it is, how long are waiting lists for public housing for people with disabilities? My son has been on a list for 5 years.
And I will get to that. I have a whole section on public housing. For right now, I'm going to leave it at the frustrating answer of it depends. Generally, there are long waiting lists, but it really depends on what housing authority, what kind of housing you're looking for. But again, I'll touch upon that shortly. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
So now I'm going to start talking about specific programs, and I'm going to give you an overview of just kind of the information that I'm going to provide. I'm going to start with the key affordable housing resources, and you'll see at the top of the list, appropriate to the question that was just asked, public housing. Under that are housing vouchers, and then finally other affordable housing options. And these can be private affordable housing options, and I'll talk more about that. But for each of the programs, I'm going to give you a description of the program with basic information, who administers it, so who runs that program, what's the income eligibility, and that ties back into our previous slide, which it'll show you whether it's going to be 80% of the area median income, 50% of the area median income, or lower. So it'll show that, the rent level, so what you would be expected to pay, where to apply, and then finally, again, bringing in the previous question, wait lists, both how to get on and the possible wait time for these wait lists. So I'll just provide some brief remarks about applying for government-funded or subsidized housing, which can be different from finding an apartment or a home ownership opportunity in the private market. In many cases, there are more rules, more forms to fill out, and maybe even more frustrations along the way because you have to deal with, really, it's bureaucracy. There are a lot of different program requirements that need to be met, and so there'll be a lot of forms that you'll be filling out, a lot of paperwork that's going to be processed, and then, unfortunately, wait lists. But the benefit is that these subsidized housing options can, if you get them, really provide stability and a wonderful resource for keeping your housing payments low and for finding someplace that you can afford to live over the long term. And there are often tenant protections involved too, so that means it's harder for you to lose this benefit or to be put out from, for example, public housing than perhaps maybe on the private market being evicted and facing something like that. So again, those are some of the benefits. I'll cover a little bit about what to expect when you apply, and if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them if I can. And part of that's going to be part of the discussion at the end when I talk about tips and different ways to maybe increase your odds. For example, apply early and apply often, although applying often isn't really the right way to put it. But just trying to get yourself on the wait list or applying for as many of these resources as possible, for giving yourself as good of a chance as possible for getting one of these. So with that, I'm going to start off with public housing. So public housing is affordable, and again, I'm going to work from a very kind of high level to introduce you to that resource and then drill down more into the details. So at the high level, public housing is affordable rental housing for low and moderate income households owned by a housing authority. So it's government-owned housing. These are for individuals, for families, for seniors, and there are many public housing units that are dedicated solely for persons with disabilities. So again, it can be a wonderful resource. Not only are public housing authorities, they run their own housing and affordable housing and have these opportunities, but often they know of other resources in that community. So it's a really great opportunity for, if you live in a community with a public housing authority, reach out to that housing authority and talk to the people there, because maybe if they can't get you into their public housing, they at least know of more resources that you would be able to access. So I'm going to start with, who's it administered by? Local housing authorities. So in Massachusetts, most cities and towns will have their own local housing authorities, a public housing authority. So that's a first place to start in your own town. If you go to Connecticut or New Jersey, I know that there are public housing authorities there. All states have public housing. In Massachusetts, we're fortunate that we really do have a robust system. So if you're in Massachusetts, it's great to take advantage of that. Income eligibilities. So this is a little bit higher. To apply for public housing, you only have to be at 80% of the area median income. And again, that's that higher rent, that higher income level. The other programs we'll see have 50% of the area median income as their eligibility. So this, you can have a job. Remember, in Boston, it was about that $51,000. So it's really a great broad resource. And then rent level. Again, this is what you're expected to pay. You'll be expected to pay about 30% of your monthly income. So if you have an income, you'll pay 30%. With public housing authorities, you may not even need to have an income, so you won't have to pay for it. There may be some payments that are involved, but really it goes from 80% of the area median income that qualifies down to zero, no income. So again, a great broad resource. Now the tricky part in Massachusetts is that where to apply. So right now in Massachusetts, you need to apply at each individual housing authority. And in my next slide, I'll show you a scary number, not a scary number, but a big number that shows how many housing authorities there are in Massachusetts. And that's both a plus and a minus. It's great because there's a lot of those resources that are available. But it can be daunting because that means you have to fill out an application and send it to each one of those housing authorities that you're interested in. So it's a lot of paperwork. And online, the good news is that an online application and waitlist should be available soon. Massachusetts, the state is working on it, so we hope that will be up and running. And we're working with the state to really get that up and running, because it really will make a big difference in increasing access to this important resource. Now, there was a question about a waitlist before. Now, waitlists, and I'll just mention quickly that they're maintained at individual housing authorities. So the person who asked the question before, I'm not sure which house. I said it depends, and that's because it really depends on which housing authority waitlist you're on. In Boston, the waitlist can be very, very long, years and years and years. I'm not surprised to hear that it was 5 years, if that's where you are, and I'm not sure where you had applied. But each housing authority in Massachusetts has its own waitlist. So you can be on the BHA, the Boston Housing Authority waitlist, or you can go over to Cambridge, which is not too far away, and find that Cambridge Housing Authority waitlist and get on that. Then you can go to Somerville, because Somerville has a housing authority, and you can get on that waitlist. So you can be on as many waitlists as you want, but again, there's no guarantee or strict timeline for how long you should expect to be on it. There are, and you'll see under the next little clause, ask about local priority for current residents. Many housing authorities do have a priority for a current resident or those working in that community. So these are questions that you want to bring up when you do speak with someone at the Housing Authority. And as a strategy, as a tip, I would always encourage you to call. A lot of the information can be found online for these housing authorities, and you'll see a list of all housing authorities in Massachusetts is right there. And a lot of them do have their own websites, and they have applications and how to submit them electronically. But I would always encourage you to pick up the phone and call and connect with someone at that housing authority to learn about something that may not be on the website, or just have a conversation about your application, why you're applying, and see if there is that local preference for where you want to live. So again, there's a list of all housing authorities in Massachusetts, and my next slide, which I'll bring up right now, shows the number of housing authorities in Massachusetts. There are 253 different housing authorities across Massachusetts. Now, again, that's great because we have a robust public housing system of 80,000 public housing units. So those are 80,000 different apartments and homes for persons. 2/3 of those are dedicated for the elderly or for persons with disabilities. So again, really, as a specific resource for persons with disabilities, public housing is a wonderful option. Again, I'll just talk, countrywide. So outside of Massachusetts, each state has their own housing authorities. Many are centered around larger cities. So if you're not in Massachusetts, I would encourage you to search for public housing, either on your state government's website or just by Googling and picking up the phone and calling that housing authority to find out how to apply. So in addition to maintaining housing, and I list some of the things that housing authorities do, they maintain the physical units of affordable housing, but they also administer rental vouchers, and this is really important. The rental vouchers I'm going to talk about in length in a few minutes, but so the housing authority not only has those units, but they also administer housing vouchers. So it's, when you apply, you can apply for both programs, so it's a really good thing. And then also really importantly, they serve as a resource for other housing programs. So a lot of different affordable housing, either economic mobility or job training programs, they're run at housing authorities because they serve the community, the residents that live there. And so there are other things that you can connect to through the housing authority. And even if that housing authority doesn't run the program, they probably know about programs in the area that you can apply to, either affordable housing or for supportive services. So a really great place to start. Now, a quick search tip for public housing authorities is apply to where you want to live, but also then look at the surrounding communities to see if there are smaller housing authorities or other places in that area that also have housing authorities that you can apply to. Because again, you want to apply for as many of these as possible to give yourself the biggest chance for getting off a wait list and for getting that unit. You'll see at the bottom of this slide information on applications for public housing, and this is Massachusetts specific. So there is an application that can be used at all housing authorities that can be downloaded there, but then again you have to send a copy of that application to each of the individual housing authorities. So that's where you can access that. I'm going to pause for a second, take a sip of water, and wait to see if there are any questions on public housing.
We have, excuse me, we have about 4 questions. Do you want them all now? Okay.
I'll see if I can answer, if it'll come up later in the presentation. Okay.
So 2 of the questions apply to Section 8 housing. Mm-hmm. One is saying that they're receiving conflicting information on Section 8, saying that at one point they heard there was a central list, and then now here you're saying to apply to each housing authority.
I will, yes. So there is a distinction between the public housing itself and then the Section 8 vouchers that they administer. And I'm going to talk about, this is great that these questions are coming up. My next slide is going to be about the Section 8 program, and I will cover that information then.
Excellent. Okay. Another question is, what do you do if the housing authority is hostile to disabled young people?
That is a very difficult question, and unfortunately is not an uncommon problem. So housing authorities, there are a lot of elderly that live in housing authorities, and a lot of times there can be conflicts between other housing authority residents and persons and younger persons with disabilities. Just having the two different lifestyles between, someone who's younger and may have a disability and someone who's elderly, it makes for sometimes some strained living situations, and that's a real problem at public housing authorities. In that case, I would really encourage you to talk to an independent living center. Independent living centers are organizations, in Massachusetts at least, organizations, there are 11 across the state, that offer peer supports for persons with disabilities and also advocacy. And they work on issues related to that and to bullying in public housing. That's an issue that's come up. And I'll talk about independent living centers and how to contact them later in this presentation.
Okay, great. And then the last question, I'll hold off on the other Section 8 because I know you're coming up to that. The other question is more general. It's a parent saying that their son is 14 years old. They can already envision that they're going to need public housing at some point in the future. How can they prepare themselves?
I think right now at 14, unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to live on their own. I believe it is 18, or if your son or your child does have a disability, or when they would be able to live independently, whether that's 18, whether that's 22, or even later. At this point, I would say just start learning about all the resources, start calling and finding out about options. Even if in terms of public housing, start forming a relationship with the public housing authority in your community. And then as soon as that person is eligible to apply, to do it and to fill out that application and send it in, because the earlier the better. I don't think that you'll be able to apply at 14 and then say, well, by the time I get off, my son or daughter will be able to have an apartment, because I think that would be you would have to verify your son or daughter's age and information on the application. So I'd say you probably have to wait for that. But again, right now, just start thinking about different strategies for finding housing later, when you can start and send in those applications, and then also planning resources. If there's any way for you to start saving resources to help get any of the services that you need, that's really important to start thinking about now.
Okay, great. Those are our questions.
Okay, so now moving on again, all the questions are really doing really well with keeping on topic of where we're going next. So this next section of the presentation, I'm going to talk about housing vouchers. Now, housing vouchers, it's a general term, and then I'll talk about the specific programs like Section 8 and then some other state-specific housing vouchers. But from a broad, general level, housing vouchers provide rental assistance to help low-income households afford apartments. The voucher covers the difference between the rent charged and what the tenant can contribute. And again, we talked about, when is housing affordable? It's that 30%. So with vouchers, generally a voucher will have you pay about 30% of your income, depending upon the program, and I'll talk about the different programs and the different rent levels you pay. So you pay that 30% of your income, and then the voucher makes up the difference between that and then the rent charge for that apartment. So there are two types of vouchers, two flavors really. There's a mobile voucher and there are project-based vouchers. Mobile vouchers are, as they sound, they're movable. So if you get a mobile voucher, a tenant who receives a voucher finds your own apartment on the open market. So you'll take it, you'll go, you can find real estate listings and see if there are available apartments, and you take your voucher there, and it stays with you when you move. So if you have a voucher and you get it, and you live in an apartment for a little while, and you decide to move, you can then take that voucher with you and apply it to wherever your next place is going to be. So it's really flexible. It's wonderful in that way. And in terms of Massachusetts, they can be moved anywhere in the Commonwealth, anywhere in Massachusetts. Now, a caveat to that is that when you're looking for an apartment, the rent must meet applicable fair market rent standards. And what that means is that HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Not only do they set the area median incomes, but they set area rent standards. That's the fair market rent. So you have to find an apartment within that fair market rent. Now, the fair market rent, unfortunately, in high-cost markets like Boston, the fair market rent is often lower than the actual market. So where the fair market rent for a one-bedroom, HUD might set it at $1,200. Unfortunately, the market in Boston will be a little bit higher than that. So, it might be $1,800 to rent an apartment. So those are numbers that you want to find out. And I have a note under there that if you're having trouble finding an apartment with the established fair market rent because you have a disability and need access to certain kind of housing, you may be able to ask for a reasonable accommodation to increase that payment standard. So again, just having this information to be an advocate for yourself or for who you're searching for. Again, this is considered a reasonable accommodation, and that's something that I'm going to talk about in a couple places. There are things that you can ask for because of your disability to have a reasonable accommodation made, and one of these is increasing that fair market rent standard. So those are mobile vouchers. Under that, you'll see project-based vouchers, and again, it kind of is what it sounds like, where it's based in that particular development or project. So if a building is built and it has different apartments, it's a project, then some of those units sometimes have vouchers attached to the unit itself. So when you're living in that unit, you pay about 30% of your rent towards income, and there's a voucher attached to that specific apartment that makes up the difference between the rent and your payment. With a project-based voucher, however, the voucher stays with the unit. So if you move out, you unfortunately do not get to take that voucher with you. So when you're applying for vouchers and looking for opportunities, make sure you know whether it's a project-based or a mobile voucher, because again, depending upon what you need and what your needs are, if you think you're going to be moving or you need that flexibility to move, it's important to know whether or not you have a mobile or a project-based voucher. Then again, if you're going to stick around in a place for quite some time and you think, okay, no, this is a place for either myself or who I'm looking for where they can really stay here a while, then a project-based voucher really can be a wonderful resource. So I'm not going to pause here just because I'm going to jump right into the specific programs. So the ones I'm going to cover right now are the Section 8 Housing Voucher Program, Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that was brought up before. That's a federal program. And then I'm going to talk about our Massachusetts state-specific voucher programs. And this includes the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, which I'm going to refer to as MRVP, and the Alternative Housing Voucher Program that I'm going to refer to as AHVP. And then finally, I'll touch briefly on the Department of Mental Health, DMH Rental Subsidy Program. I'm going to, again, just continue right along, and I'll pause at the end of this slide for some questions on Section 8. So the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, the important thing to know about this is that it's a federally funded voucher program. So this is money that comes from HUD through the federal government, and it is available. Again, I said I was going to say when these resources are available anywhere in the country. Each state has Section 8 and has access to Section 8 because it is a federal program. So if you're in New Jersey, there are Section 8 vouchers there, and if you're in Connecticut, there are Section 8 vouchers there. They're in Massachusetts, they're administered by housing authorities and regional housing agencies. So the housing authorities are all the public housing authorities that we just talked about. And then in addition to those, in Massachusetts, there are regional housing agencies. And these are nonprofits that provide a whole host of housing resources. And I'll provide more information for you on these agencies later in this presentation. But just know that they also administer vouchers. So it's really important that you know about these and how to contact them. The income eligibility for the Section 8 program is 50% of the area median income. And again, just comparing it to public housing, 50% is a little bit lower. Public housing was 80% of the area median income. For vouchers, they're going to be at 50% of the area median income. So it's a little bit lower income standard. And then rent level for a Section 8 voucher, you're going to pay about 30% of your monthly income, give or take a couple of percentage points. And that'll all be explained to you, when you get your voucher. And then where to apply. So this is the question that was brought up before. There is, for the federal Section 8 voucher program, and I put emphasis on federal Section 8, there is an online central application process. So that's wonderful. So you can apply online. You see the link right below here, section8listmass.org, and same as saying apply today, because if you haven't already, apply. And that's because, bringing me down to my next point on the wait list, although there is an online and centralized list, it's a very long wait list. It can be 10 years before you come up off of a Section 8 wait list. That's the estimate that the Regional Housing Authority in Boston, Massachusetts gives when you ask, how long can I expect to wait? And they said, well, the last person who got off applied in 2006. Off the wait list applied in 2006. And that's not to shock you. That, unfortunately, is the reality of the situation. There are, of course, 10 years sounds like, I say 10 years, but if you take some of the strategies today and you apply for all the different resources that there are and stay on top of your applications and make sure you know about any preferences, because there are preferences sometimes for persons with disabilities, for local preferences. So to know about those things, to advocate for yourself, to make sure that you stay on a wait list, and people move on and off all the time. So again, I encourage you to apply today and to get on the list as soon as possible. The participant who has a 14-year-old child, again, unfortunately, I don't think you'll be able to apply right now and get yourself on a wait list, but you make sure that as soon as you can, as soon as your child is eligible to apply for him, just to get him there. So I'm going to stop and take any questions about the federal Section 8 program.
We have quite a few questions coming in. I apologize
Okay.
if some of these are duplicating what you just said, but I've been working on the question side. So a couple of questions about vouchers. Can you apply for a mobile voucher to all the housing authority?
For the Section 8 programs, yes. So you apply through the centralized website, section8listmass.org, and that will get you on that list. And then once you're issued a mobile voucher, it'll be administered by a housing authority, probably around where you live. And they can be used statewide. So again, to apply, you would access that through that central application list.
Okay. Another is the voucher system a list program?
Is the voucher system a list program? I'm not sure if that person can maybe type in and clarify. It's a list program in that your name is put on a list and you make your way slowly to the top of that list. And pretty infrequently are people ever moved around or bumped up on that list. Again, preferences might be made for certain populations, but it is a list in that your name will go on it and you will slowly make your way up that list as people get off.
Okay, and so their follow-up question was just that. Do they need to reapply, or is it something they can put their name on once and then be done?
You put your name on once and then be done. It's important to keep on top of when you applied, what paperwork you applied, and I'll talk about this in the applying for these benefits tips section, but really keeping copies of your application, where you sent it to, when you sent it, and who received it, and any information that you were given by anybody you may have encountered during the application process. Really, it has to be up to you to keep those records, because I've heard too many stories of people saying, I got on the list and I didn't keep track of it, and they said that, they tried to contact me, but my address had changed and they didn't know how to, and then all of a sudden I wasn't on the list anymore. So it's up to you to really stay on top of things and to be an advocate for yourself or for whoever it is that you're searching for.
Okay, great. Do you have two more questions?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one is dealing, again, with local housing authorities. This person was told that for their own local authority, seniors get priority over those with disabilities, and that someone with a disability will only be considered if there aren't any seniors ahead of them. Is that something that sounds right to you or reasonable?
So whether it's reasonable, I don't think it sounds reasonable. For public housing, certain public housing authorities have units dedicated specifically to the elderly. I talked before about, there are 80,000 units of public housing in Massachusetts. 2/3 of those are for the elderly or disabled. I don't know the breakdown of how many are geared specifically towards the elderly, but I do know, unfortunately, that if they are geared specifically towards the elderly, they do get a preference when applying for that public housing. There are other units that are dedicated for persons with disabilities, but again, there are unfortunately units that are for the elderly that they do get a preference when applying. And it's a matter of talking to the housing authorities, seeing what kind of units that they have available, and trying to get on a wait list or apply for the specific kind of housing that meets your need.
Okay. Another question deals with inconsistent employment. And the question is, what happens if you are eligible but then your income increases? Mm-hmm. And then subsequently, what if you lose that higher income job? So
that talks about, that is an issue that does come up if you are on one of these programs and your income changes. There's usually an annual recertification process when it comes to these programs, and when you apply, you'll need to prove your income. And I'll talk a little bit about this later of what kind of information you should gather when you're getting ready to apply. But you'll need all of your income information and be able to prove and verify your income, whether you don't have any income, and that's okay for some of these programs. If your income does increase at the time of your annual recertification, in some cases it's once every 2 years, depending upon the program, and your income has increased over that time, you'll pay a higher percentage of your income. You'll pay a little bit more based on that 30% because you earn a little bit more. Now, if you do earn so much that you go over that 50% of the area median income for the Section 8 voucher program, as is still on the screen here, you do lose your voucher. So that is, it's you hope someone that they're in a fortunate enough situation where they are earning enough now to hopefully maybe afford rent on their own, and that voucher can then go to the next person. But if you do recertify and you go over the income limit, unfortunately you will have to give up your voucher. Now, for if you drop in income, kind of the inverse is true as well. If you drop in income, you'll actually pay less towards your rent as a part of your total housing cost. And that can happen either at the annual recertification, or there are ways to recertify in the middle of the year if you do have a sudden loss of income or a job loss that was unexpected. There is a way for you to recertify during that process, so that you're basically saying, I don't have a job, I don't have an income anymore, so you can do that then.
Okay, excellent. So wonderful. That is it with the questions for now.
Great. All right. I will continue on then. So we're going to go from Section 8, which is federal, to our next voucher program, MRVP, the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program. And, the key thing I'm going to point out here is that this is a state-funded voucher program. So this is Massachusetts-specific. There are the federal Section 8, and then there are state MRVP. And this is where there may have been conflicting information on, some vouchers have a centralized wait list and some vouchers don't. In Massachusetts, this is why. So MRVP, again, just going over the basic information that I'll do for all of the programs. MRVP is administered by housing authorities, similar to all of the other resources so far, and again, those regional housing agencies. Income eligibility, again, it's 50% of the area median income, so same as that federal Section 8. And rent level, here's a little bit of a difference. MRVP, you'll pay 30 to 40% of your monthly income. So with an MRVP voucher, you may be paying a little bit more. The federal Section 8 voucher, you're going to pay about 30%. So again, MRVP, you can pay up to 40% of your monthly income towards that rent payment. Where to apply? Again, this is a key difference. There is no centralized online application for MRVP. You need to apply at regional housing agencies or at housing authorities when those vouchers are available. So not all housing authorities have MRVP vouchers around Massachusetts, so you'll really need to see whether those housing authorities that you're applying to, that you've already been in contact with because you want to apply for public housing, you want to ask, do you have MRVP vouchers available? Because it's a state program, it's a much smaller program. There are about 8,000 vouchers of the MRVP vouchers in Massachusetts. So again, it's smaller, so not all the housing agencies are going to have this resource available. You can also apply at the regional housing agencies, and those are the housing nonprofits that I talked about before. And again, I'll provide information on how to find your regional housing agency for how to apply. And they do maintain wait lists, or they can maintain wait lists, I should say, because some of them don't. MRVP vouchers, because it's a smaller program, they're available not too often. The state will come out with several hundred new vouchers, sometimes 100 or so new vouchers a year, and a wait list will be opened up, and they'll do a lottery at the individual regional housing agencies. And that brings me to my next point, the wait list. So the individual regional housing agencies and housing authorities may have wait lists. Unfortunately, they also may not. It really depends on how many vouchers they have or how many they expect to get or to become available. So it really depends. And I think that might, unfortunately it's not a great answer, but it answers the question from before of, I was told that, there's not always a centralized wait list for vouchers. Because in Massachusetts, in the state voucher program, there is not a centralized online application or wait list. There's more information on the MRVP program at the link that you see at the bottom. Like a voucher, like a Section 8 voucher, it can be either mobile or project-based. So again, to just know what kind of voucher, if you are offered one, what kind of voucher it is, and the different requirements for it. So that's MRVP. Are there any questions about MRVP or Section 8 vouchers before I go on to the next voucher program?
We do have a question about the wait list, and someone's wondering if it's public, and is there any way to check what number they are on the list?
So the wait lists aren't public in that you can see everybody else who's on it, and unfortunately it's hard to know what number you are on that wait list. Oftentimes housing authorities will say, or the administrating agency like a regional housing agency will say, well, we know that you applied in 2014 and the last person who just got off our wait list applied in 2008. So that's the kind of information that you may get. It's probably not going to be a number on the wait list and how many people are ahead of you, but it's important to remember, even if you do get that information from a housing agency saying, oh my goodness, I'm number 1,272nd on a list. People come and go from Massachusetts all the time, so they may not be even waiting for a voucher anymore. People do get other housing resources but stay on those wait lists. So if you do get a number and say, oh my God, I'm so far behind from the top of the list, that's not always the best information to use because, again, lists become stale. People change or take themselves off wait lists or forget to take themselves off wait lists. So don't get discouraged by that information.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move on to our next voucher program, and this is specifically for persons with disabilities, including those with mental health conditions, or it's called the Alternative Housing Voucher Program, AHVP. And these are mobile vouchers, so again, they stay with you, and you can take them anywhere you want to go, for disabled persons under the age of 60. And this goes back to, this voucher program really was in response to the problem that we were talking about before at public housing authorities, where public housing authorities were only offering units to the elderly and there weren't housing resources for persons with disabilities. That is almost exactly why this program was created in Massachusetts. And this is a state-specific program because it is for non-elderly disabled individuals to use because there wasn't enough public housing available for those persons with disabilities. So in Massachusetts, again, state-specific, so I apologize to those of you not from Massachusetts, it's a tiny program. It is very small. There are only about 530 of these vouchers available in the state, and I'm sure you know that there are more than 530 people who would need this kind of resource. We're hoping that it continues to grow. Last year, there were 120 new vouchers made available, and hopefully this year there are going to be even more. So it's a growing program. Going over the basic information, it's administered by local housing authorities. So again, it's the public housing authorities that we talked about. You need to get in contact with about the other voucher programs or about public housing in general. But the local housing authorities administer it, and you apply for these vouchers through them. Income eligibility, 80% of AMI. Now this is a little bit higher as well. Again, because it's for persons with disabilities, saying no, we want those people to be able to access these resources even if they do have a little bit of income, because we know that the housing need is there. So 80% of the area median income is the income eligibility. The other requirement being, again, disabled person under the age of 60. Rent level, you're going to pay between 25 and 30% of your monthly income. Again, recognizing that with persons with disabilities, there is such a great housing need, so you're going to pay a little bit less of your income with an AHVP voucher, which is great. And then where to apply? Again, at the individual administering housing authorities. Unfortunately, there is no central online application or wait list for this program, so you're going to need to call, and when you talk to a housing authority, ask, do you have alternative housing vouchers, and can I apply? Unfortunately, the vast majority of housing authorities will not have these because there are only 530 vouchers statewide, but worth asking for, because if they do have it and they do have a wait list, you can get on it. As of last year, I think there were only about 2,000 people. I know that sounds like a big number on the wait list for AHVP, but compared to MRVP in Section 8, where there are tens of thousands of people on the wait list, this is a shorter wait list. So if this program is available and you do find a housing authority that has it, get yourself on that wait list. One of Chapa, I talked about the advocacy that we do. One of the main things we want to do is increase this program because there is such a need for housing for persons with disabilities. And we're really doing everything we can to increase resources for this program. There's more information at the link below about AHVP, including, I think, what housing authorities may have some vouchers. So take a look there, and again, when you contact your housing authority, ask about this program. Are there any questions about AHVP?
No, there's not. Not right
Wonderful.
now.
All right, I'm going to move on. This is just a quick overview. This is really a cheat sheet for you when you get this presentation that Joanne sends you later. This is really just something for you to use as a reference point to look at all the different programs and compare the different eligibilities, the different places where you can apply, and the different wait lists. So nothing new on this slide, just a rehash of all the information that I just went over on the different voucher programs. And also public housing, you'll see there. So moving right along, and I see we're coming up at 1:55. There is one other semi-voucher-like program in Massachusetts, and that's the Department of Mental Health DMH Rental Subsidy Program. And this is assistance for low-income persons who receive supportive residential services through the Department of Mental Health, through DMH. So with this, it's not so much an open application process, and that's why it's a little bit different, but an eligible resident will pay 30 to 35% of their income, and these eligible residents are those that are income eligible, as determined by a housing authority, but then also in need of supportive residential services as determined by DMH. And that as determined by DMH, that's what kind of makes it a closed referral process. You have to already be in the DMH system and in need of these residential services to be referred to this program. And again, you see the last one is that you have to be eligible to participate in a residential services program. that may be applicable to you, and so that's why I wanted to talk about this. But it's just not a very widespread program. Again, it's not as large as we would like to see it be. But again, another important resource that you can find out more about if you are involved with DMH, and there's information both on the subsidy and also on the services that the Department of Mental Health provides. Are there any questions on this one?
We do have a couple of questions that came in between slides.
Sure.
So one is, are AHVP mobile?
Yes, AHVP vouchers are mobile in that if you get one, you can take it anywhere that you'd like in Massachusetts.
Okay. Another question is regarding supportive services, and someone's asking what they are, and would something such as life skills be included?
So supportive services under the DMH rental subsidy program, I'm not sure what those supportive services are that are offered through DMH residential services program. I know when we talk about supportive services more generally, it can include life skills, and often does, and there are organizations like the independent living centers that have more information on what those services are. So I'll talk about getting in contact with an independent living center to learn more about the supportive services. And I'll just say, generally speaking, a lot of these resources that we talked about, they are often paired with supportive services. So I said at the beginning I wasn't going to talk about that because that's a whole other topic, but there are a lot of different supportive services that are paired with these affordable housing resources, because we know that if you're in affordable housing, there are probably other services that you will need. So we see, again, housing, this presentation is covering housing because that's the foundation for everything else that can be added on top of that. So I would start here and then find out more about the supportive services through different nonprofits like the independent living centers, or I'll talk about community development corporations, CDCs, who develop a lot of low-income housing with supportive services, and I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Okay. And finally, are there fees associated with these applications?
Not that, so I can say no definitively for public housing, for Section 8, and for the voucher MRVP and AHVP. I just don't know definitively for DMH, but I would almost, if I was a betting guy, I would bet that there's not a fee for applying for the DMH rental subsidy.
Okay, great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move on and talk about other affordable housing options. So the programs that I just talked about are direct government subsidized programs where it's about those physical either vouchers where you get cash assistance. Oh, hold on, the phone's ringing. I'm just going to mute it real quick so you don't get distracted in the background. There we go. Sorry about that. So there are the programs I just talked about, which are direct government subsidy, almost a cash assistance like with the rental vouchers, or the hard public housing units where it's that brick and mortar government-owned housing. But there are other affordable housing options, and this is applies both in Massachusetts, but can also apply in other states. It's affordable housing, so housing that is owned and managed privately sometimes by a nonprofit, or a development company that includes both rental and home ownership units. The developers, when they build these housing units, they receive grants or tax credits or other incentives, financial incentives, in exchange for creating affordable housing units. So if there's, in Boston, for example, if there's a big development going up that has 200 units, the city of Boston requires that a certain percent of those new units are affordable housing. So they are, rent levels are restricted, and so that there will be affordable housing units in that development. In that case, that's the first example, inclusionary zoning, where the developer is required to set aside a certain percentage of these new units as affordable. In that case, it's usually for that you would apply through that development itself for those affordable housing units. So to know what's being built, what your local landscape is like for these affordable housing programs. Other examples include 40B developments, and this is Massachusetts specific. In Massachusetts, we have a law that says that 10% of your housing in your city or town should be affordable, and if not, developers can come in and propose affordable housing developments. So to know when those are being proposed in your town or in a town that you are interested in and where those are, because they will have affordable housing units that you can apply for, get on a lottery that you can then either qualify for either a homeownership unit or a rental unit. There are also units built by community development corporations, CDCs, or other nonprofit developers, or sometimes there are just units developed by cities and towns that use local funds. In Massachusetts, cities or towns, a lot of them have affordable housing trust funds or other boards or commissions, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, where they can use these local funds to create a unit. They can buy a house and say, we're going to make sure that this is affordable. And so it's finding out about how to find out about those opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about strategies for finding those. Are there any questions about these other affordable housing options?
We do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Again, they go back to the previous topics. One is, are AHVP vouchers only available for accessible housing for physically disabled?
No, AHVP vouchers, although the definition of disability for AHVP vouchers is broader than a person with a physical disability. So it can be someone with a mental health condition or another mental health related disability.
Okay. And then the other question has to do with, is a rental subsidy usable in private housing, or does it need to be in a DMH vendor program or public housing?
So a voucher that you get can be taken to private housing. You can go to any building that you can see that has a unit available and apply, and then that voucher will be applied towards that unit. And again, that's for the mobile vouchers, because there are the project-based vouchers that I spoke about. Those are attached to the physical units, and often those are in other affordable housing developments.
Okay. And then finally, do you have knowledge or an opinion on the Housing Works software?
On the Housing Works software? I really don't. I'm not familiar with it, so I apologize. I can't answer that.
Okay. Those are all we have for right now.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to move on, and now I'm going to talk about search tools and tips. And so we're moving on from the specific programs themselves to ways to give yourself the greatest odds for finding a home that meets your needs. So they can be challenging because there's no single database or program application, but again, hopefully you can incorporate some of these tips to help you find the right place for you. And first, I want to put in a plug-in for Chapa, because we do have a housing search guide for people with disabilities, and it covers a lot of the topics here, and I'll cover it real quick. And then I'm going to touch upon each of these points in separate slides, but checking with your city or town, either on the website or giving them a call, talking, of course, with local housing authorities. That's kind of a common theme for today, is talk to that housing authority because they know. Contact the Housing Consumer Education Center, and I'll explain what those are when I get to it. Finding a CDC or other nonprofit developer. Talk to an independent living center, an ILC, and that's come up a couple times. And then in Massachusetts, we have a website that can help you search for the kind of accessible housing that you need to fit either your location or your any special need that you may have. So I'm going to move on and start with the first one. So again, plugging Chapa's resources, but we do have a housing search guide for persons with disabilities, and the link is right there to download it. Again, it covers a lot of the information that I talked about in this presentation. It's helpful to persons with disabilities, but also just persons that have low incomes, because a lot of these programs are applicable to persons with low incomes. And it's just the unfortunate situation is that a lot of people with disabilities also have low incomes. So in that way, it's more universal, but it is geared towards persons with disabilities. So I encourage you to take a look there and to download it. Next, check the city or town website. when searching for housing, and this is not just for the public resources, but also that private affordable housing that may have a unit or two that are affordable, many cities and towns, they're the front lines of what's available in that town. So if you have someplace that you know you would like to live or you think would be a good fit for you, check out what information is on that town's website on affordable housing. Many cities and towns have affordable housing committees or housing boards. They all go by different names, so I can't say search for Affordable Housing Committee of Brookline, or because, as you see, I just included this as an example. In Massachusetts, Brookline has a housing advisory board, not an affordable housing committee, because if you look at Barnstable, they do have a housing committee, but they handle kind of the same issues of planning for housing, knowing what housing opportunities are there, and for keeping an eye on the resources that are available in that town specifically. So check out that website, see if there's contact information, and make phone calls. Make phone calls. If there's email addresses of people to contact, email, and then write physical letters as well, because those are sometimes our cities and towns aren't the most up to date on the technology, so it's snail mail might get a response. But again, just giving yourself as much of a chance as possible to find out about housing opportunities in that particular town. Because again, municipalities may have information on units built through, and again, these are the programs I talked about: inclusionary zoning, affordable housing trust funds, and these are local pools of money that are dedicated solely to building affordable housing, or 40B developments, which are the developments that go in that have to have a component of affordable housing. There are 40B, there are these kinds of developments all over the state, but again, unfortunately, there's no centralized database of how to search for them. I'll show you a website a little bit later on that has some of it, but that's only if they're posted. So it's worth calling up that town and saying, "Hi, do you have any 40B developments in your city, in your town? Do you have any homes that were built through your affordable housing trust? Are there any affordable units that were built as part of any development because you have inclusionary zoning?" Those are the kind of specific questions that you should ask. And a lot of towns will say, "No, we don't have this," but I want you to get that 1 out of 10 time that a town says, "Yes, we do have a 40B development, we do have a unit available, and here's how to apply for it," because that town is going to know. Related to that, the point at the bottom is, I'll say it again, talk with your local housing authority. Many of the city or town websites will link directly to the local housing authority website of that specific town, because they are going to be the ones that know the most about these housing programs available locally. So although your search process may be very town specific, you want to search as many and talk to as many different housing authorities as you can to say, "I'm interested in living here or in this area. Can you tell me about the affordable housing programs in your area? Do you have a local preference?" I talked about that before. Are there preferences for persons with disabilities? How do I get on your wait list? All questions that, again, you need to ask to be an advocate for yourself or wherever it is that you're searching for. I'm going to move on to my next tip, which is to contact a Housing Consumer Education Center. I'm going to shorten that to HCEC. So HCECs are regional nonprofits that offer answers to a wide range of questions about all types of housing. And unfortunately, this is Massachusetts specific. I'm fortunate that Massachusetts does have this resource, but they really are the people that you can pick up the phone and call and say, "I need help finding housing," or "I have a question about this resource," or even if you are facing a housing crisis and God forbid you ever are, say, I need assistance with paying my rent this month. These are the organizations that you can call to get that kind of assistance and to find out about different housing resources. Across Massachusetts, there are 9 regional agencies, and you'll see a breakdown, a little map below there. These are the regional agencies that I talked about when I spoke about the voucher programs. These regional agencies administer those vouchers, both Section 8 and MRVP housing vouchers. So if you apply to Section 8, you might have and you get a voucher. It may be administered through one of these programs. MRVP vouchers are often given to these regional agencies, and that's when you can call and say, I'd like to apply or I'd like to get on your wait list. These would be the nonprofit housing agencies that you would call to say, I heard about the MRVP program. I would like to find out if you have any available or if I can get on your wait list. So these are really important nonprofits, and you can find out more about each of these organizations that are listed here at the website below. I'm going to stop just because I haven't done it in a few minutes. Are there any questions about anything I've been talking about?
We do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them is, excuse me, how do you best manage an apartment complex that isn't offering affordable housing to their current residents?
So, if you have a complex that's not offering affordable housing, if it's a privately owned complex, unfortunately, there is no requirement that they need to offer affordable housing options. That's just the unfortunate situation. I will say that there's a slightly different situation that you can be aware of that would be a problem if it comes up. But if, for example, you get a housing voucher and you go to a private development, an apartment building, and you say, I would like to rent this apartment and I have a housing voucher. Unfortunately, more often than I would like, landlords will say, oh, I don't take a Section 8 voucher. I don't take a voucher of any kind. That is, in fact, against the law. That's housing discrimination. So if you ever experience that, then that's a big problem, and you should absolutely, there's a Fair Housing Center in Massachusetts that can offer legal help with that, but that is against the law, and to be aware of that. Very rarely is it ever as straightforward as, oh, you have a voucher, sorry, I'm not going to rent to you. There may be things that, other ways that landlord accomplishes not renting that unit, saying, oh, I'm sorry, it's not available anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, I decided not to rent it to anyone. More subtle things. If you think you are being denied access to a home because you have a housing voucher, I would get in touch with a legal aid service or with the Fair Housing Center of Massachusetts immediately, because again, that is against the law.
Okay, and we have a couple of questions surrounding income. Any of the programs that seem to be based on income, is this the only measure that's taken into account? And what if the individual has some savings or other assets?
So there are some programs, it really differs from program to program about asset limits. I don't know of asset limits for the voucher programs. I just know of the actual income levels. So unfortunately, I don't have a good enough answer prepared for you about different asset limits. So I would have to either find out more or follow up with information on that.
Okay. And then the other is, are there affordable housing units here, but that they're being advertised to outsiders?
Are there affordable housing units here that are being advertised to outsiders? I'm not sure necessarily what the question is, if they can clarify.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, maybe the next time I pause, if that person can clarify. There are fair housing and marketing requirements for a lot of the affordable housing. So it will be advertised, but I just, without a more specific question, I'm not sure where to answer.
Okay.
So if that person can re-ask or provide more information. But I'm going to move on because I see we're at 2:15, which is great. We had a lot of questions, and we just have a little bit more to go over. Another resource that you can reach out to in your community, and these are both, they're finding a community development corporation, and there are, known as CDCs, there are CDCs all over the country. In Massachusetts, we have a very vibrant network of CDCs, so it's a great resource. But these are nonprofits that work to transform communities to create and expand economic opportunities for low and moderate income people. So they're really involved in a wide variety of activities, but a key thing that they do, and they're often involved with developing affordable housing. For example, and I have a CDC here, in Salem in the North Shore, there's North Shore CDC, and they manage affordable housing in Salem, Peabody, and Gloucester. So not only are these affordable housing, a lot of them offer support services. And again, it can be anything from life skills to treatment centers to providing medical, easy access to medical care. So it's really these nonprofits that develop this housing, they're in it for the right reason, and they're great resources. So if you have one located in an area either that you live or that you're looking to move to or someplace that you might be interested in living, find out if there's a CDC on that area and if they have any housing that they've either built, plan on building, or maintain themselves, because you can often apply for these programs with that CDC. In Massachusetts, I put a link for finding your local CDC. There's an organization called MACDC, which kind of is the association for all of the CDCs in Massachusetts, and so you'll see all the different CDCs available in Massachusetts there. And then I'll talk about the independent living centers that I spoke about, the ILCs. So these provide services to people with disabilities seeking full integration in society, including helping to find community-based affordable housing. They also offer peer counseling, skills training, and advocacy. We work with ILCs on housing related to housing for persons with disabilities because not only are they strong advocates, but they just are so good at knowing all of the different resources to connect you to for these supportive services. So again, you have the housing itself, but then the supportive services that you may need, ILCs can help you find it or at least direct you to who to talk to. In Massachusetts, there are 11 ILCs that serve every region in the Commonwealth, kind of like the housing nonprofits, and you can find out about the ILCs at that link right down there. And I just put an example. So for example, the Boston Center for Independent Living, BCIL, they offer a monthly housing workshop that focuses solely on providing information on housing resources, and they do that every single month. So again, wonderful programming, wonderful people, and a great service to reach out to help you with your search. Before I move on, are there any questions?
Yes, there are a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, I'm getting some clarification about the last question.
Sure.
And what's happening is a person is looking for handicap accessible, affordable housing unit. Mm-hmm. And they're in a privately owned property. Mm-hmm. But as units are becoming available, they're being advertised to the non-current residents or to some outsiders.
So that I'm not sure, because I think it would depend on the really the marketing plan for that development. I'm not sure what the requirements are for specific developments on if they need to make sure that those units are offered to current residents, or whether they can go to an open wait list or to an open group. So it really depends on that development, and I would encourage that person to get in touch with that particular development and just find out as much as they can about what the different application guidelines are.
Okay, and finally, there's a question about the housing applications. Mm-hmm. They had heard that they're going towards the idea of generalized. So if you apply to one town, you may be offered housing somewhere else in the state. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
It is Massachusetts is working to create a universal application for these housing programs, where you would be put on the wait list for all of them in all the different cities and towns. It hasn't happened yet, and so right now it's it's more scattered than it is centralized. But hopefully we are moving in that direction, so that again you just have as much a chance as possible of accessing that resource, or any resource really. Oh, did I go over this? So I'm going to give another plug for something that Chapa helps maintain and run, and that's the Mass Access Accessible Housing Registry. And this is an online database that Chapa maintains, and it is a search tool for housing in Massachusetts. And you see the link at the bottom, so you can go check it out there. But then I just pulled some of the things that you can search by. So you can search by accessibility status or features. You can search by region, what part of the state you want to live in, affordability level, and that's at 50% of are you extremely low income, are you low income, number of bedrooms that you might need, and it'll pull up any of the available units that have been posted. Now the caveat I always say for this website is that it's only as good as the units that are posted there. Although we would like all housing to be posted, any available housing to be posted, oftentimes they are not. So, or there just aren't available units. So I would encourage you to check out this website. You can actually save your search. So even if something's not available now, you can save your search and be emailed when something does become available and your search gets pinged and it gets sent to your email. So really check out this resource. And there's also information on other affordable housing resources. A lot of the information that I covered today, including our housing search guide, is on this website. So a great clearinghouse for information on how to search for and find accessible, affordable housing. And then the last part of my presentation, I'm just going to talk about tips for applying to housing. We talked about all the different people that you can get in contact with, some other organizations that you may be able to reach out to. But then these are just some really quick general tips that's applicable to, I think, everyone today. But, kind of going back to the question that we had before with, your 14-year-old child, it's great. Begin the process early. Start as soon as you can. I don't know whether you can start right now, today, but get yourself on wait lists, find out about applications, be on top of what resources are there, because the landscape is always changing. There might be a new resource available coming out that I didn't cover today that will be available soon. So stay on top of things and search. I say search or apply early, apply often. But the next point is to, before you begin your search, and I talked about how housing is really a personal decision. It's some of the most personal things that we can talk about, where we want to live and what kind of home we want to have. Understand your housing needs when you begin the process. Where do you want to be located? How many bedrooms do you need? What kind of features do you need in your apartment? Do you need it accessible? Do you need a ramp if there's a wheelchair involved? Do you want to be a homeowner, or do you want to rent? Homeownership, there are affordable homeownership resources. Many are the 40B units that I talked about. But what are the pluses and minuses of that? If you're a homeowner or the person that you're searching for becomes a homeowner, what does that mean for your flexibility if you need to sell or to move? Or with rent, it's easier to move, but you're not building that equity if that's a concern for you of having some kind of accumulation of assets or wealth. Related to that, often persons with disabilities, it's will that asset limit become a liability for you? Will you not be able to qualify for certain programs? And I know this question came up, and I apologize for not having a better answer, but that is absolutely something you want to keep in mind when you apply for these programs and accept it, or accept these benefits. What are the different asset and income limits? How much can you afford to spend, not only in your housing costs, but then all of the other services that you may need to attach to that unit? So you may get that unit, but then do you need an aide to live there? Do you need 24-hour care? Those are all should be taken in consideration as part of your housing costs. And then what other factors might make it difficult to obtain housing? Are there evictions on your record? Have you, background checks, credit checks, things like that will come up. Just have information about all of that before you go to apply, so that nothing is a surprise. You want as few surprises during the application process as possible. The bolded bullet point is apply to as many programs or developments as possible. And I talked about this. It's kind of a theme. Get on the wait lists, and it may be a long time, but your chances are better the more wait lists that you're on. And always request to be added to a wait list. Never assume anything when you apply for a program. If people say, okay, no, sorry, we don't have any available, they may not tell you that, oh, but we do have a wait list that you can get on even if we don't have anything available now. So be proactive and advocate for yourself and say, I know you don't have this resource available now, but is there a wait list, or when do you expect to have more of these resources available that I can apply for? Next is to gather the important information. So gather the evidence of income and benefits, probably for the previous few years. Gather information on any necessary medical records, any proof of disabilities or things like that may come up that you may need, and keep this information as up to date as possible. It's because when you apply, you'll need that information, but then if you get on a wait list, and then if you get off that wait list, they'll need to recheck because it may have been 3 or 4 years since you last applied. So have up-to-date information available so that you can have it ready when there might be a short amount of time that you have between getting off that wait list and making sure that your application is final and complete. And then, if necessary, request a reasonable accommodation. If you're having a hard time gathering all of the files because you have to go to different places and you need to arrange transportation, request a reasonable accommodation to say, you know what, I need some more time to gather all the information. Again, I said there was sometimes there's a short time frame between the time they say, you're at the top of the list, you're off the wait list, but we need to re-verify all of your information and we need it now. That's a great time to say, you know what, I am absolutely so interested, I want to apply, but I'm going to need some more time to get all of this to you because I need to coordinate a lot of this information and I just don't have that ability. So again, request a reasonable accommodation if need be. Other tips are be aware of any preference or priority that may apply to you. Again, I talked about with public housing, a lot of them have local resident options or preferences. That also applies to a lot of the inclusionary zoning units or 40B units, or if a city or town builds its own affordable housing, there is often a local preference for a current resident or someone working in that town. So be aware of those and ask about those. Really important, keep copies and dates of any applications and records of who you talk to and when. Although you would hope that the administering agency or a central wait list would keep record of all of this, don't place your faith in them all the time. Advocate for yourself. Say, you know what, no, I know I applied for this on this date, and I know I talked to this person. Can you provide me more information? Because later on down the process, it may be a few years later, someone is new at that administering agency, the staff is turned over, or they may have lost some paperwork. You never know what's going to happen. So keep records, because then if you are one, that's better for you to say, you know what, I do have applications, a copy of my application, and here it is. But if you are ever denied a benefit, or say, you know what, you're no longer on this wait list and here's why, and you have proof to dispute that, you can appeal it, and you can go through that process, the appeal process, and be in as good a position as any to say, you know what, no, there was a mistake was made, here's all the information that you need, I want either my place on the wait list restored, or I want to not be denied this resource. Related to that, respond promptly to any correspondence. There will be periodic updates that administering agencies may ask for, saying we're just checking in with you. Please let us know of any updates of information, and you want to respond to that. Or they may say, we want to make sure, or you may be at the top of the wait list and we're letting you know that you're about to come up. We need you to verify that you are still on this wait list and want this resource. And if you don't respond within a certain amount of time, you then lose your spot. And I wouldn't want that to happen to anyone because you didn't respond in time. So just be aware of any correspondence and respond promptly. Related to that, notify the administering agencies of any changes in your contact information. Whether it's your address, a lot of these programs still operate through snail mail, so always update your address. If you've moved, update whoever it is that you applied to and contacted with an application. Update phone numbers, update email addresses. Again, just don't lose out on a resource because the administering agency may have stale or outdated information. And I already talked about this, but if appropriate, appeal the denial that you receive. If you think that something didn't happen in the correct manner, advocate for yourself and say, you know what, if there is an appeal process, I want to go through it and take advantage of that process. So that brings us almost to the end, but are there any questions about the search tips or anything else?
We have one last question, and it is about applying for housing out of state in Rhode Island. And is that possible?
So with some of these programs, it is possible. The Section 8 program is federal, so Rhode Island will have federal Section 8 vouchers. And I think it might be Rhode Island Housing, maybe the administering agency for that, but I'm not positive. And so you'd want to check with your state to see who administers the federal Section 8 program. And then public housing. There is public housing in Rhode Island. But I don't know who specifically runs it. It might be a city. So I would check with your local city to see if they have public housing.
Okay, excellent.
Great. And then finally, we're at 2:30, so I think timing is doing pretty good because we've answered a lot of questions. But these are just other online resources that you can check out to search for affordable housing. And there's a description of these websites. So at your leisure, take a look at those websites. And again, as use as many of these resources as necessary to find different housing options. So these are online resources. More online resources. Many of them are the websites that I included in the previous slides, just trying to list them all centrally. But when Joanne sends this out, all of these links should be live on that website or on the presentation when Joanne sends it to you. So with that, there's my contact information. Please feel free to contact me or follow up with more questions, either by email or by phone. And I would encourage you, I'm plugging Chapa, to either join our email list where you can find out about different programs that Chapa puts on, or join Chapa, support the work that we do, because we need the support of all of you to help us advocate for these important programs and to put on this programming. So with that, I've reached the end of my presentation, and I know it's at 2:30, so I'll leave it up to Joanne to see if she wants to have any other questions answered. But I just, again, thank you so much for logging in today, and to AANE for hosting me.
Well, Eric, thank you very much. This has been excellent. I think there's a ton of information that you presented, and I want to repeat that the slides and a copy of this video will be sent out on Monday for everyone. So please take a look at it. Please contact Eric if you have any more questions, and feel free to contact us at AANE. Our telephone number is 617-393-3824, or you can go online to aane.org. And we have a group in adult services that are excellent that can help you. So with that, we're going to have to end for now. And again, thank you very much, Eric.
Oh, absolutely. I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
All right. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.